much for joining me. Here's the thing. When I first really started to dive into the art world, kind of looking at it almost as an industry, like I would for any of the other industries where I have clients. So one thing that was consistent for me is that you are everywhere. I'm not kidding. I pick up this new book called Talk Art, and you've got the foreword in it. So I think the area where I want to start with is you wrote a book called How to Be an Artist.
How to Be an Artist by moi. I could not tell you how to be a critic, but I can tell you how to be an artist. And it's a very thin book. Buy the book. There's great pictures in it. I promise you'll hate me. Well, I'll love you.
If you had to like put it into a few sentences, how would you recommend someone be an art collector?
I would say the way to become an art collector is the way you become an art critic, the way you become an artist, really the way you become anything. You have to understand, I have no degrees, so don't listen to me. I didn't go to school. I'm 70 years old and didn't write my first word until I was 41. To be an art collector, you must show up. You must see as much as you can. You must stay up late like a vampire with others of your kind. How will you find them? I don't know. That's for you to do. There is no such thing as one ant, one artist, one art collector, one art critic. Art is for anyone. It's just not for everyone. You have to find similar vampires like you and start staying up late together, going to shows, museums, visiting websites, whatever we all do to not seem total fools. You want to have a life lived in art. And that is a beautiful, rare, magnificent thing. You never retire from it. No one retires from the art world. You are just there to channel it. Look at as much as you can.
You know, one of the things that I'm really interested in is this navigation of those traditional places, the auctions, the museums, the gallerists. But there's also, I think with social media, there's been this trend, and I think it's a good one. And you know, as we move more into the angle of women artists, I'm intrigued by it, which is the role of social media and how that has democratized that experience a little bit. What is your point of view on self-representation, artists who are bypassing some of those traditional channels and taking it directly to people like me?
Instagram and social media were game changers, absolute game changers. I happened to come to it very early because for women, artists of color, idiot, loser, late bloomers like me, the art world was a pyramid where the one was speaking down to the many. I saw and really took advantage of that. Instead of the one speaking to the many in the former art world that no longer exists, no matter what you think, you may now have the many speaking horizontally to one another. This means the gatekeepers are gone. All that stuff you're reading about auctions, it's really about 55 mostly white men buying about 55 mostly white males, some of them great artists, for obscene, ridiculous amounts of money. The gates are down. If you go on your social media feed, my God, I find more artists in a morning of just sort of hashtag archaeologying, going from one crappy account to a better one, to a crappy one, to a good one. And I find things than most curators with 18 different degrees will find from going to every biennial and every major art fair. You can find and share with each other. And if you start zeroing in, let's say you want to show or buy or are interested in the art of women, well, without the gates, for the first time in 50,000 years, we are starting to hear the other 51% of the story. Before women started writing novels in the 19th century, we had just decided 49% of the population, gender-wise, should tell the story. The other, you can assume, is more or less the same. Well, obviously, it's not. I'd say it's also okay. May I go on a little?
Please go right ahead.
I would say it's also okay to buy only women or only artists of color. Why is that? Of course, you're going to buy some mediocre crapola artists just because you're trying to get your demographics right. I don't argue that. And I think that's a good thing for this reason. For the last 500 years, we've only collected men. And the truth is, most of them were mediocre anyway. Almost all of them drop away from art history, and the good ones tend to last. This will happen with artists of color, women, all kinds of artists as we get older. So is it an investment? I know nothing about money other than I want it and I hate everybody with it. But I will say this, there are no guarantees with an art collector. I tell you, anyone that guarantees you something's going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today, walk away from them. Never listen to them again.
Yeah.
Only listen to people who might share thoughts like this. I'm not sure about this artist's work, or she's been a great artist, but she's in a weak period. That's who you can begin to trust, like each other.
How do I, as a novice collector, navigate some of the dichotomy that I see out there? So I'll give you an example. I have a keen interest in women artists and supporting women artists. But it's really interesting because there's this artist by the name of Marco Battellini who did this sculpture, a gold nude sculpture based on Kendall Jenner. And my impression from what I saw about this piece was celebrating it and, into the zeitgeist with the Kardashians, blah, blah, blah. On the flip side, I look at someone like Maggie Hambling, who does a public sculpture, to celebrate Mary Wollstonecraft. And there's a nude female figure in it, and she gets slammed. And I understand the difference of the context. One's public art, one isn't. But as someone who's relatively new to this space, I'm looking at this going, isn't that a double standard? Aren't the artists being held to different standards? And is this just something that women artists are going to have to continue to endure and break through?
I would say the two examples that you pointed out are both bad works. I didn't like either. However, the guy that made the Kendall Jenner, that's kitsch shit. That's not even art, what he made. That's a pop, where the sculpture in Great Britain was highly admired, but highly criticized. I'm one of the people that criticized it. But the truth is, after I criticized the work, I learned much more about her career. She's kind of an epic figure, a character in English art, somebody important. She's an artist. I would rather buy a bad work by a real or a good artist than the best work, a piece of crap like that other guy made. It is a double standard, and that's why you cannot listen to the public press unless you select certain writers. My wife's name is Roberta Smith. She's the co-critic for the New York Times. Trust her. She will tell you how it is. Most of the critics at the Times are good. You can listen to me if you want, and there's a handful of others, but criticism has dwindled into it's all happy talk. It's top 10 lists, it's market reports, who
Articles.
did what best booth. Don't be hurt or offended by the idiots writing about the good Kendall Jenner and the bad Mary Hamlin. Because unless you're with a better critic like me, you're getting nothing.
I really, like, I dove in deep when ArtNet did its study in 2019 on a woman's place in the art world, and breaking down all of the statistics and the data. And the one that has always stuck in my head is that 2008 to 2019, the $197 billion in auction sales, 2% of those works were by women artists. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that like pisses me off.
It should.
And yeah, and so I get really pissed about it. So then I get optimistic because I'm like, well, this is what the industry lords are telling us is the problem and it needs to change. But fast forward to this year, and I'm looking at this explosion on NFTs, which I'm curious about from a corporate standpoint. NFTs, Christie's, who do they put forward? And it's the record breaker on NFTs, some white guy from South Carolina.
Is that Beeple?
Yeah, it's people.
Listen.
And I'm like, but that's where I'm like, on the one hand, the data is telling you there's a problem and you have an opportunity to do something to address it. And your response is to put forward the very thing that is the problem in the spirit of breaking records on auction sales. And I've talked with, in fact, Precious Wallace is the artist here in Minneapolis who I had said really was looking at post George Floyd as this new era in contemporary art. She and I have had this conversation about the work that we feature of hers, which was originally designed to be an 11-foot high mural, except we have it on a scarf. And we've talked about, do we try to go into the NFT space with it because she's a digital artist. But our ability to even break through on this is so mucked up.
I disagree.
You do.
I think that those guys are fucking distracted. Let them buy their 55 mostly white male artists buy, and that's fine. Those people only buy what other people like them buy. It's a self-replicating, clear-cutting, sterile, ossified system. I'm going to tell you what's right underneath that. Do not look at the big numbers that you cited. I would argue that the opposite is happening. And to the good and the bad, that right now the market only wants women and artists of color. Now, I don't say that with any cynicism. I say it because the market is guilty. It wants to act woke. It wants to act with it. It wants to act socially concerned. Rich people want to make it look like they support George Floyd, and I do not doubt their motives. And what they're doing in their rush to make up for 50,000 years of those other statistics, they're going to start buying the very art you want people to buy. Of course, then big names are going to rise up and become the only one they buy. But I promise you, the market and institutions have already decided. You are winning the war. Only galleries are a little behind, and that will change in 5 years. The market has decided what it's buying. Institutions are almost 100% now geared for the art of women, art of people of color. Of course, they're going to do the masterpieces by the men. I don't want them to stop doing that. I need to see Titian, Cezanne. I disagree with you if you say put them in a salt mine for 100 years. I'm almost dying. I need to commune with the ancestors one more time. I want you all to read a piece I wrote called My Life as a Failed Artist. It's your story, anyone who's listening to this. You who listened to demons who told you you couldn't do what you wanted to do. And mine was of somebody that listened and then had to go into exile for 10 years, really depressed, a real jerk, and then reinvented himself as an art critic, even though, as I say, I hadn't gone to school and had never written a word in my life, but wanted to try to see if I could discover my own voice. Well, that's always hard, right? I see in my mind what I call in my head the blue-yellow accord, and it's in Vermeer. I want you to imagine Vermeer's view of Delft and see the blue sky and sort of a gold reflection off the kind of stucco of a building, and then it reflected below in some plum blue, turquoise blue with the yellow. I do not know what art is, but I think in the 28th century on Jupiter, when they boil all of the essences of art down to what it was, I think Vermeer will be in there somewhere. Whatever he was making, art. Also, cave paintings, art. 51% of the handprints in the caves were by women. Obviously, that's who lived there. That's who was making all of this work. It's absolutely obvious, but we had to pretend it was only shaman males. The best meal I ever ate, because I am well known in the art world never to have cooked once in my life, including coffee, because I was raised by animals. You will read this piece. Is at what was then called the greatest restaurant on earth in Spain near Barcelona, called El Bulli. There, I had a 59-course dinner where I was ravished. I literally was ravished, where this guy broke down food the way Picasso broke down art, to the bite, to how long you chew, to the order of flavors that appear on the tongue, in what order, everything. And it's like when I saw him after dinner, I felt like, are you going to call me? I wanted to marry him. But that was the one meal I ate in my life. It was the best meal. And I went home that night with my wife after 59 courses. And we had a huge dinner because it didn't fill me at all. My wife and I have a silly set of rules because we're both so public as art critics that we don't buy art or even accept it as gifts. Because if I accept your work, Kelly, and then your friends know that I've written positively about it, or we have a fight and we cease being friends and I write negatively about, you see the problems.
A big problem.
So I collect thrift store painting, anything under $25, no dogs and no clowns. And I don't have any near me, but I like to buy the worst ceramics that have ever been made by novices, because I find them to have the power of my favorite art ever made, which is cave paintings.
Interesting.
It's absolutely primal, and I love them. And they cost 25 cents usually.
I've got a garage full of ceramics my mom made back in the 70s. I should ship them to you.
Hey, I love shitty ceramics. I don't want to go anywhere. I wish I could go to Venice, Florence again before I die. I'd like to go back to Istanbul. I'll die never going to India or Japan or China or Australia. I wish, the truth is, certain great art that I've seen never leaves me, ever. I can summon it as I can summon like Homer's Aeneid or whatever your favorite book is, that it lives inside of me. It's always changing. It's never the same each time I see or read it in person. The way your Hamlet is different than my Hamlet. My Hamlet is different each time I see it. That's what happens to me in my favorite art. And to me, the most powerful experience I ever had really was in a cave, looking at 50,000-year-old cave painting, because I knew it wasn't magic. These were people that had looked at, observed, and knew mammals better than any people had ever known them when they were in rut, when they were in estrus, when they were about to shed, how they used to group around water. Whatever they did, the work had space. The big animals are closer to you. The smaller ones are further away. It was all there. It told me that art is among the greatest operating systems our species has ever invented to explore consciousness.